The information provided on Dr. Tom Roselle Live by Dr. Tom Roselle, DC, interview guests, show co-hosts, or substitute hosts is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. It is for general information purposes only. Information from this broadcast should not replace the appropriate consultation and examination process by a licensed physician. Always consult your own physician prior to changing any current medical directive or prescription.
Hey everybody, welcome to Ageless Health live stream, and with yours truly, Dr. Tom, and we got an interesting program. It's actually kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together that we've been talking about for several weeks. And so we've been talking about hormones and how they react. We talked a little bit about andropause and menopause, and we talked about, some triggering mechanisms, but I want to kind of put all of it in a platform that you get it a little differently, that you understand a little bit more than what we have touched upon. And don't forget, coming up on the 13th of November at the Roselle Center for Healing in Fairfax, we're going to put a lot of meaning into this craziness called your hormones. And there's more hormones than what you can possibly think of. If you were listening to the program just a minute ago on WMAL 105.9, you heard me talk about all of these other pieces of the puzzle that were actually initiated from fat and fat storage within the body. So it comes down to this as well. Fat can be caused by hormones, but fat also causes hormone triggering in the right platform. And we're going to talk about that just a little bit. So please bear with me because I want to make sense out of this for you. It's important that you understand that it's not, fixing your thyroid is not about just getting some thyroxine, which is a hormone. Having insulin resistance or depletion of insulin isn't just about understanding that you might need a little bit more insulin. It's about what's causing the problem. And you have to look at all the intimacies, all the pieces of the puzzle, from how the nervous system works in cooperation with this, how the other biochemistries of the body, the neurotransmitters, which I touched upon a little bit, cause those hormones to, if you will, be productive. There's many hormones. Did you know that melatonin is a hormone and it's produced in two places? Yes, in the pineal gland in your brain. So if you went straight back and back here, kind of this far back, you're going to have an area of your brain where the pineal gland is housed, and that area will be very significant in so many different things, not just your third eye, so to speak, not just your sleep cycle, so to speak, but also triggering other things. Melatonin is also produced, the majority of it, in your intestinal tract, in your microbiome. So this is a subject we can get into at length and really begin to put the problems where they belong, in a place of understanding. So let's do a little bit more of that today. Let's talk about what really takes place in that beauty called your body, and why some of you have, some excess poundage. I said in the radio program just a few minutes ago that that soft roll that looks like a kind of a roll around your belly, your middle section, that's a thyroid problem. And so why does it happen there? Why do you get the puffiness, the softness all over your body? That's a thyroid problem. And if you don't fix the thyroid, you can't fix anything, because there's a whole back portion of that. So we're going to leave that. I'm just kind of tweaking your interest. I want you to understand that a lot of these things, it's your hormones, the emotional piece of your hormones, the fat accumulation of your hormones, the energy that drops because of your hormones. There's other pieces of that puzzle. So let's begin the process, and we're going to make this as succinct as we can so you really understand, if you will, what's taking place. And that's critical. You need to know, right? If you don't know, you need to know. So we'll start with the one thing that everybody hates. It's called fat accumulation, and it has to do with something called storage, and it also has to do with something called burning. You got to burn the fat up. You need it. You need all these things. And there's hormones that are important in all of these things. So fat storing occurs when certain hormones become unbalanced, if you will, right? So we're talking about things like called glucagon and cortisol. Everybody say, "Oh, I got cortisol weight." Well, maybe. And HGH, and then that's growth hormone, and then insulin, and then leptin. So all of these guys work together to handle aberrantly or the way it's supposed to be in fat storage. Then you get things that are fat burning. You got this fat, right, that you're putting away in very specific areas, but we want to use it as fuel in many cases. And so we're going to look at things like glucagon and cortisol and growth hormone again, and then we're going to look at insulin, and we're going to look at leptin. Now, they all do different things in your body. And when you have fat storing going on, there's things like glucagon drops, cortisol goes up, growth hormone goes down, insulin goes up, leptin goes up, and then glucagon and fat burning is going to go up high, cortisol is going to go down, growth hormone is going to get high. Why? Because we're using that for fuel to grow and become better. Insulin goes down, leptin goes down. Now, we could spend the next 3 hours talking about the why behind that, but I want you to get the idea that it ain't just like they want to make it as simple as take this pill. Now, excuse the vernacular, I did it on purpose, but here's the deal. You really need to know. So you go to your doctor and you say, oh, they're going to give me bioidentical hormones. Well, okay. And at least if they do it the right way, it's not going to hurt you. But is it appropriate? Are they really answering the question that, here, take this because your body can't produce it on its own anymore, without going to a place of understanding that there may be something else, How about that person that has no libido? I told a story a little while ago on this guy that came into the office, and his doc, had put him on different hormones and so forth because, everything was going into failure, erectile dysfunction, and it was working. He put him on the things, and he said, but I don't have any desire. Desire is libido, but it has to do with, is it hormonal? Nah, it's neurotransmitter. It's something called dopamine. And if that dopamine level is not balanced, or if you will, GABA level is way too high, which makes you kind of lethargic, not want to do anything, slows you way down, that may be part of the problem. But that's not what they're looking at. Matter of fact, we're talking, there's manufacturers now have gotten pretty, savvy to some of this, where I don't know why they weren't tuned in before. It's not that I agree that every guy that has ED needs to go out and get Viagra, which is a vasodilator, by the way. It came off from heart medication many, many years ago. But they're starting to add together, different hormones, right? They're putting in what? They're putting in dopamine with Viagra, with Cialis. And why the dopamine? Because now it gives that I want to situation a very different impact. So it doesn't do you any good, to have things working, if you will. The hydraulic system is doing what it's supposed to be doing if you can't do anything about it. So let's talk a little bit about, what these hormones look like, what they do. It can cause all kinds of problems that you wouldn't think that they are causing. So you get estrogen dominance. Now, estrogen dominance in guys as well as estrogen dominance in women. If you see a man with that big old stomach that just kind of folds out in front of him, that's estrogen dominance in a man. I mean, you take a look at it, he's got man boobs, they're real loose. He's got the softness around. It's problematic. We're going to talk a little bit about that in times to come. We're going to do a couple programs on just men, but you have male estrogen dominance. You have female estrogen dominance. That's that loose puffiness that you have also around the midsection. The rest of the body might be doing okay as far as its tone and so forth. But there's ways of dealing with that, and we want to make sure that first we identify what it is before we go on to the fix, right? All right, so let's talk a little bit about those crazy things that we call hormones. And so what about your body fat? This, the softness, everything. Oh, I'm way too fat. That tells you about your hormones. So belly fat can be insulin resistance and cortisol. So we look at that first. Now, truncal fat means up and through here and neck, right? That has to do with extreme cortisol issues. That means that you're in fight flight all the time, that your body is in overdrive and so forth. So how about the inability to build muscle mass? You can't put any tone on. You go to the gym, it doesn't work. That's testosterone. How about thyroid problems that have to do with whole body fat. If your whole body's kind of fat, that's thyroid. And it's also leptin resistance, the inability to transport energy into the cells to make them work and burn the way it's supposed to. How about just those hips and the thighs and your butt muscles, right? Or lack thereof, with a lot of fat jiggling around. That's excessive estrogen and low progesterone. So when we know those things to occur and we can have these signaling, it's not just about giving you a thyroid pill. It's not just about giving you hormone, because pretty soon you're giving somebody, you know, if you will, natural bioidentical thyroid. Pretty soon you're giving them the hormones, the progesterones, and the estrogens, instead of trying to provoke the body to do what it's supposed to do. So less is always better. So let's talk about, what do these silly hormones actually do? So estrogens regulate the female productive system, menstrual cycles, and decreases as time goes on. But guys, also, you have to have a modulator to keep tissue healthy. And believe it or not, that's estrogen. We got to have it as well. Progesterone plays a role in ladies' menstrual cycles, but also in blunting, balancing of estrogenics, but also in our world, the environmental estrogens, and we have to be aware of those. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it's been talked about multiple times. It's produced from the outer shell of the adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys. Insulin, help regulates blood sugar and storage of glucose in the body. So when we need it, it can be converted in transport into energy. Thyroid hormones, we talked about T3, T4. There's something called ghrelin, and it stimulates our appetite. When ghrelin gets out of control, we can't stop eating. And leptin is the opposite. It balances it out. So those are just some of the hormones. We talked about others in the first part of the program today. And so what I want you to know is that we have to look at these things. If you go just to the adrenal system, then we're going to look at estrogens and progesterones and different androgens and the testosterone levels, DHE, pregnenolone, progesterone. So there's a whole bunch of things that we have to take into consideration. It's not just a matter of take this. Hey, have you ever had the experience you've gone to your doc and you know that something's not right with you? You know that it's off, your mood has changed, something, you're not burning fat, you have to do a whole lot more to get a whole lot less when you're in the gym, and it just doesn't make sense to you. Well, that's generally, could it be my hormones? It could be your hormones, but the question is, what one specifically and what's missing relative to its production. So we talked a little bit about thyroid in the last part of the program, or the first part of the program today on radio on WMAL 105.9. But here's the deal. If your thyroid is supposed to produce a hormone called what? Thyroxine, which is known as T4. How does it do that? Well, your doctor say, well, the pituitary has to produce TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, great. So what happens if you get, you keep poking at that thyroid gland with TSH, say produce T4, but it doesn't get it done? What do you look at next? You say, well, let's give Synthroid, which is T4 artificially. Or do we ask the question, what's missing? What has to be available to the thyroid for it to work properly? Well, the first thing it has to have is it has to have low inflammation. Inflammatory levels go up because of stress. Inflammatory levels go up because of eating really lousy food. Inflammatory levels go up because of imbalances and other things that come in where something's too high or too low. But let's say that the inflammatory levels are not really out of control. So what do we look at next? We look at the substrates that need to be available to produce thyroid. So what is what? So we're talking about iodine, and then we're talking about tyrosine, and we're talking about trace minerals of very specific forms. Together, if they're available and there's no inflammation, then your thyroid, providing that it's all there, will produce what? It will produce thyroxine, T4. 80% of the hormones T4, 20% of it is T3. Now, it has to go to the active form. The active form is produced in the liver, and that's called free T4, free T3. Now, your doctors, for whatever reason, they don't look at all the 8 different tests, if you will, that are necessary to look at what piece of that puzzle is not working or if there might be something else going on. It's too easy just to write a prescription and say, hey, here's the deal. I don't know about the rest of you, but if I have a patient that's there and they've got menopausal belly fat, that's what we'll put that piece. And ladies, you'll forgive me for that conversation. Guys, you get the same thing. It's called andropause belly fat. And we need to know, is the thyroid working? Is there a whole feedback mechanism that's being shut down because of inflammation? And what can we do about it? What is the process? How can we look at these hormones and say, do we got a problem? We got to look at things like adrenaline. Adrenaline breaks down glycogen. We look at cortisol. It mobilizes fat. Estrogen. It enhances, blood flow levels and increases the levels of that good guy called HDL lipid. Ghrelin, the hunger hormone, it regulates it. Glucagon breaks down your glycogen that's stored, your growth hormone, insulin, leptin, testosterone. So we have to understand how they all are intimate in each other. And on the 13th of November, we're going to get into that. I promise you. I'm going to say, look, this is what you got. Look, this is what's going on. Look, did you consider this? Have things gotten worse because of all of those things? If the answer is yes, that it's been progressive over a period of time, somebody is missing the target. But if you understand it, you can ask the right questions and demand the right tests. If somebody's in pain all the time, you're going to have a fight-flight reaction that's going up. The tiger is chasing you. That pain is the tiger. And it starts raising your cortisol level. And when that cortisol level goes up, a couple of things will happen. First, on the front side, what do? You start burning up you. You start losing muscle mass. You start, having that emaciated look and feeling. Now, I don't mean you don't have fat around you. I just means that there's shifting that is taking place. So then you go into the chronic phase. It's always there. Now you don't do much. Your metabolism starts shutting down. You start storing fat. You got that belly fat around you. And all of those things can cause a problem. So when you look at anybody, you have to make sure that you understand the target. Now, alcohol has a tremendous effect on hormones. If you drink too much alcohol, more than a drink, maybe 3-4 times a week, and I talk about a drink, and we're talking about better if you're going to have it and you can handle it, a little bit of red wine, period. So if you get that ongoing irritation, all of a sudden you get that bloating and you get that exhaustion feeling, and you get, guess what happens? And, I could say me, hair loss, but I don't drink like that. But hair loss will show up as well, believe it or not. It's important that we understand the ongoing mechanism of these hormonal balances, if you will. So we're going to give you a couple clues on how to deal with that and what you should be looking at on an ongoing basis, right? So first, you got to understand that cholesterol is involved in this game. When cholesterol levels are artificially dropped down by taking these statins, and by the way, cholesterol doesn't cause your blood vessels to clog up. They can control that. They want you all on statins. They want to do all those things. But here's the deal. Cholesterol produces something called progesterone. And then progesterone goes to different forms of progesterones, and then it goes to the production of testosterone. And from testosterone, it's going to produce your estrogens and so forth and so on. So if you drop the cholesterol levels down artificially, your hormones are going out the window. It's not going to work. So, what do you tell your doc? Most of them are buying into the drug company's direction because the drug companies want everybody on, testosterone. So how many of you, on anti-cholesterol medication? So what happens? How do you really look at it? Is it the cholesterol or is it the subfractions of the different cholesterols? And you can deal with them very specifically if you know the pathway that's involved. So when that occurs, have your doctor run all the fractions of your different fats, of your cholesterol. So you get the big A and small a and big B leptin breakdowns. Okay. Uh, if you don't do that, if you don't get those apolipoproteins, is what they're called, and the balances that they should be, you can take cholesterol the rest of your life and you're still going to die of a heart attack or an aneurysm or a stroke because it's not fixing the problem. So when we talk about hormones, we're going to walk you through the process. We're going to show you exactly what the intimacy and interconnections. We'll talk about some of the medications. We're going to talk about how to fix this thing. We're going to talk about what happens when pain shows up. We're going to talk about what happens when you have chronic exposures to the electrical fields, and we all are what our cell phones and our iPads and our computer screens and all those things. They have a major impact on this stuff called hormones. And if we don't understand that that's taking place, we got a problem. We truly have a problem. So let's talk about where all this stuff comes from, right? You've heard me talk about HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. All right. So pineal's up here, hypothalamus is up here as well, and they talk to each other. So the hypothalamus triggers different things like, uh, you know, thyroid stimulating hormone and growth hormone and so forth. But it has to have other pieces of the puzzle. It has to have dopamine. We talked about that as far as the motivational process. They're called somatostatin hormones. Vasopressin, it's a hormone. And then you have your pineal, which is melatonin. It helps regulate a lot of the downward signaling. The pituitary gland, your growth hormone, your thyroid stimulating hormone, your adrenal cortical stimulating hormone. And then we go down, we got thyroid. We talked about that. We have liver, which produces something called IGF and THPO. Those are hormones that also direct different functional capacities within the liver. Your liver is important in denaturing, breaking down the different hormones so we can continue the signaling process all the way through. We talked about gastrin and ghrelin and histamine and somatostatin and neuropeptides. That's your stomach. Pancreas, insulin, glucagon, and somatostatin. The kidney, calcitrol and renin, and so forth. Ovaries, estrogens and progesterones, and so forth, as well as your outer shell of your adrenal system. A lot of stuff, right? It's not just as simple as take this thyroid medication and call me in a week and let me know how you're doing. It's not just as simple as say, let's put you on bioidentical hormones because there seems to be a shift here. It's not as simple as giving somebody ED drugs and say, it's your vascular pattern. We talked about in the last part of the program that there is a hormone that surrounds the blood vessels and causes them to squeeze, narrowing the flow of blood that increases your blood pressure and increases the potential for clotting factors. So if you don't treat that, you're not treating the right thing, and people still stroke out and have heart attacks and die. So on the 13th of November, we're going to touch on some of these things. This is a program that I teach to doctors, but I really get into the intimacies of it and get them to understand what this really means, but also how to identify it through neuromuscle function testing, how to understand the overlay with the acupuncture system, how to look at the nutritional components, how to put all those pieces of the puzzle together, and knowing that there are certain hormones that causes the mood to change dramatically. So join us. Now, I want to do a sidebar simply because coming up in a couple of days is a national election here in the United States. And I shouldn't be talking about those things, but I did on the radio program. So I just want to kind of encourage you, regardless of what your flavor is and what your pick is, please go vote. Just get it done. Don't sit back. If you're eligible to vote, if you're a citizen of this country, go vote. If you don't vote and your horse doesn't come in, you don't have any opportunity to bitch. You just have to kind of pull the reins back and not even talk about it. But get out and vote. Do it on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, coming up, make it happen, and because, at the end of the day, I think the first vote that I ever cast was back when I was 18 years old. And I've never missed a national or state election because I wanted to have the opportunity to complain or celebrate. And you can't do that unless you become part of the system. So go do it. Make sure it happens, whatever your choice is. but please make sure that you take that responsibility and, you know, take that responsibility seriously. Having said that, my dear friends, please join me coming up on, guess what, the 13th of November here at the Roselle Center for Healing in Fairfax. I promise you, you're going to have a great time. We're going to get into all kinds of pieces of the puzzle that you may not have thought about, but we're going to give you things to fix it, providing that you want to take the responsibility to fix it. And there are things you can do on your own that you're not doing. You know, I said on the program earlier today, do you sit home behind the computer all day long and don't do anything else? You know, do you kind of grab what you can to just kind of satiate, that my energy is dropping? You get a candy bar, you get a sandwich, you get, something that really isn't supportive of your body. Or are you providing the substrates, the enzymes, the neurotransmitters, the vitamins that you need to produce the other things that we're talking about called hormones? If you're not, if you don't have good high levels of vitamin D, if your zinc levels aren't adequate, if your tyrosine level is not adequate, you're fighting a losing battle, my friends. And, if you're in constant pain and you're taking different types of medication all the time, I think you're going down a really bad rabbit hole. I think you're going to have a problem. I've been on this planet over 7 decades, and I keep trying to figure out how I can make things better. How can I make sure that I get another, 3.5, 4 decades? And, obviously to put out as much data and information as I possibly can. But I want to get better. I don't want to say, what do you expect for your age? I don't know what you expect for your age, but I expect to learn more and be able to tweak it and be able to implement it and to help as many people as I possibly can, to serve people without drugs, without any outside impairment, to serve, to educate others, not myself. And remember, I do this program on an ongoing basis only for one reason only. You really deserve to have the truth. You deserve to have the information in front of you. And if you do something with it, good on you. If you don't do anything with it, knowing the truth, then you basically made that decision too. But having said that, I love you all. I'll see you on the 13th. Bye.